of sales experts. To take the lead on this, we have Shaun Koiner, who's the Chief Operating Officer at the Sporting News. Shaun, are you there? There he is.
Here, yep.
Hey, Shaun. Shaun's responsible for all operation of the storied Sporting News brand. Sporting News was one of those brands when I was growing up that if you were a real sporting diehard, that was the brand you went to. And he's overseeing the brand as it comes under new ownership. He spent a number of years prior as leading publishing and editorial at DAZN, which he helped build into a global portal. Shaun, welcome. Thanks for doing this.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you. I'm going to hand it over to you. You've got several salespeople who are going to talk about how they're going to market in the next year, and I'm looking forward to hearing it. Thanks.
Absolutely. And thank you, and good morning, everybody. I'm mindful that this is the pre-lunch panel on the East Coast, at least, so my esteemed guests are ready to deliver. Those guests include Kim Blom, who's the Senior Vice President of Ad Strategy and Partnerships at BuzzFeed, Jody, who's the Senior Vice President of Brands Partnerships at Leaf Group, and obviously Zimak, who's the Chief Revenue and Strategy Officer at Maven. And as Steve said, I'm Shaun Koiner. I currently operate as the CEO of Sporting News, which is a global publishing brand that's operated for 135 years across the world with localized territories worldwide. And just before we sort of turn it over to the group, a slight preamble that I know everybody's aware, but for years and years, the publishing ad media business is built on the backs of RFPs coming to us from ad agencies. We'd interact with planning teams, buying teams, creative teams who were largely making decisions based on ambiguous third-party data that would determine those audiences. But as everything technology evolved, first-party data and programmatic buying became led at the forefront. And that proliferation of first-party data often led with, the oligopoly, as we're calling it, big word, of Facebook, Google, and Amazon. It's no longer were agencies making those decisions around those sort of assumed audiences, but we're able to target directly across first-party data. So at the same time, as publishers, we're all dependent or often dependent on those partners, Google, Facebook, and Amazon, to sort of run our businesses as a whole. So my first question, actually, and I'll start with Avi, alphabetically, do you consider yourself a partner, or do you see those members of that oligopoly as additive, or do you find yourself in direct competition with those dominant platforms?
Hey, Shaun. First of all, nice to be here and good to see you again. For a little context, Maven, which actually was just rebranded about a month ago as the Arena Group. We are as much as we are a publisher, we're also a media tech platform for publishers, which I just want to provide that context because it'll probably provide some color on how I answer this. I think the answer is frankly all of the above. We are certainly somewhat reliant on all of these different partners, whether it's Facebook or Google, while also focused on our own properties, which we have a handful that we own, and then we have all in about 130 different publishers that sit on the Arena Group platform. So I think it's just that not all are created equal. And the reason I say that, and I'll give a brief example, sports is one of our verticals that we're focused on. So we have, a brand like Sports Illustrated, and then we have another company like The Spun, which we recently acquired. And The Spun's content is breaking news content, right? So, in terms of what they're more leaning on or more reliant on, with breaking news, it's more about social traffic that comes in. So, we very much focus and look at Facebook and, how they move their algorithms and what the needs are from them to be included as part of their feed, and also drive traffic to the spun. I would say with a property like Sports Illustrated, it's more heavily reliant on Google, right? Because search is more important when you're looking to get that in-depth coverage on whatever game was on that night or that week. So I guess one answer is yes, we're certainly relying, and we actually look at those different platforms as great partners, and we work very closely with them. I would say the flip side is we're certainly cognizant of the fact that those companies and one or two others that are in the mix, are currently taking 90 cents on every dollar, and that we're here scrapping and scratching and clawing with everyone else who's on, this panel and probably at this event for the remaining, 10 cents on the dollar that remains. So we certainly look at them as a competitor on that side as well.
Yeah. Jody, I'll go to you next, and also maybe give a little intro on Leaf Group for those who might be unfamiliar.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, Shaun, thanks for doing this and having me. I'm excited to be here. Leaf Group, we're a holding company of digital media brands, bunch of which are mainly publishing brands and a few that are commerce brands. So we do a bunch of different ways of monetizing our content. And I think of the platforms as, I think the frenemy word is probably the most appropriate, right? I don't think we're not big enough where we're going to go and try to steal share from them, but at the same point, I'm mindful that we're getting scraps, and so anything that does steal share or kind of decreases their share, whether it be the recent turmoil in the news or anything like that, is always usually a positive for business. But at the same point, they've been a huge positive for business as well. We have a bunch of brands. We're built off of the back of Leaf Group is the evolution of demand media, business that was built on SEO and on direct traffic to our own and operated sites, and we have a large reach of owned and operated. But at the same time, a lot of our top tier brands are gaining lots of new audiences on the platforms, and it's probably not audience they could get any other way. And it's great audience, and they trust us, and they have an authentic connection to our brands. And so for us, it's about really trying to use the platforms and find unique ways to use those platforms to enhance advertising and to partnership with brands. And how do we help brands bring people into that stuff? And I think in that case, and I think panel before said, talked about publishers as influencers. I mean, I think publishers are the ultimate influencers. And so building those brands and that trust on every platform and being able to find unique solutions there are ways to really build on them. I think if you're sitting around as a publisher expecting a check from the platforms just for the sake of being there, you're going to be waiting a long time. But if you can lean in and kind of continue to innovate on ways to monetize your brand within the confines that they give you, they can be a huge asset. And in a lot of cases, for a lot of publishers, provide a ton of additional monetization opportunity that might not exist without them. So that's kind of how I look at them, as kind of that frenemy of sorts, but a key part of our business model for sure.
For sure. Ken, you're at BuzzFeed. Your thoughts?
Yes. Also, thank you, Shaun, and thank you, everyone. I'm at BuzzFeed, and I, same as Jody. Tasty, one of our brands, our food and recipe brand, was built on Facebook. It was born on Facebook, and now it's moved to YouTube, moved to TikTok. It's physical products in Walmart, right? So we have delivered. We've seen Facebook in the frenemy area, but it's a source of traffic. It's a source of IP, and to the point of like publishers as influencers. And it's also a source of innovation, right? We innovated for the format and framing of, sound off video, and Tasty was born. What does that look like for TikTok? What does that look like for platforms that we may not even know about 5 years down the road? So, I really think, moving this over to the ad sales side, you're having the wrong conversation if someone's saying, should I spend my money with you or Facebook? We have the fun job of trying to understand and trying to win over dollars around all the things we could do with every single platform around an idea, around branded content, which I think is the exciting part of selling. If you want to frame it as selling against platforms, sure, but it should be selling with platforms as a complement.
Yeah, and Avi, we talked about that 10% that was left. I know if I prompted the group of, are you trying to take more share of the 10% or eat into it? It would ultimately be both, because we just want the pie to grow. But as it relates to the Arena Group rebrand, you guys talked about a vertical centric business model. How do you think that dovetails with, you know, that sort of competition across these platforms and more generally the sales proposition as a whole for you guys?
Yeah, so you know, I think, you know, we're for all intents and purposes still in startup mode, right? But we're growing fast. You know, as I mentioned, we have over 130 publishers on our platform. We're reaching 150 million uniques. And again, I say that to provide context in terms of, you know, when we're out in market and my team's in market talking to buyers and they present, you know, what that footprint looks like. You know, there's not a single, whether you're dealing directly with the agencies or the clients, there's not a single one of them who will say, oh, I wish we were spending more money with Facebook and Google, right? So they look at this as an alternative to place money at scale in a targeted fashion. So yeah, I think we have the opportunity, not just us, everyone on this panel and publishers as a whole, to chip away at what, you know, this you know, these Googles and Facebooks and even Amazon now is eating up. At the same time, you know, we do have to be competitive and we do have to be aggressive in getting as much of the 10 cents that's left for all of us, because, you know, it is just the reality that we're living in. I think there is opportunity also, you know, to Jody's point, if you leverage these resources and these platforms, you know, as a friend of me, and you can include them and bundle them and package them in ways that enhances your offering for brands, whether it's through branded content or some other form of offering via video, whatever. You know, we're essentially making sure that we're allowing ourselves and the brands that we work with to fish where the fish are. So yeah, you know, that's our approach to it. I think we have to chip away at both. And if you look myopically versus holistically at the entire ecosystem, as a publisher, you're likely going to fail. And you know, the last thing I'll say on that is, you know, that from a business development standpoint or publisher development standpoint, you know, through the lens which we look, you know, that really resonates with publishers when we're in market and we're speaking to these independent publishers. We're saying, look, you guys are in market trying to compete with not only Google and Facebook, but now you're up against, you know, the last speaker was Meredith and Vox and Vice and the networks. Good luck. You know, so what our offering is, we say, come on over and, you know, be a part of something much larger than what you could possibly do as an independent publisher on your own.
I think that's also, you know, sorry, just tying off of what Avi said is, you know, the platforms are great distribution vehicles, but they don't really give advertisers tips or tricks or even solutions for connecting to the consumer, other than finding the exact consumer and overzealously targeting them and trying to read their minds. But you know, so publishers who are connecting to consumers, whether it's on their own sites or on platforms every day, are the translators to the consumer in a lot of ways. And so I think, to what I was saying, like going to brands and saying, well, what we can be a partner with is helping you translate to an audience using the platforms. We had a client the other day who came to us and said, look, we want to work with your brand, but we only want to do it on one of the platforms, but we want it to come from your voice and we want that message, but we know our audience that we want to reach is consuming you there. And that's a great solution for us. Now, does that mean in addition to the 10% we're scraping for, part of that buy has to go back to the platforms? Probably. And is that frustrating? Maybe, but it gives us a new audience. And if it was incremental to our business, then that's a great place to be. And I think, again, that maybe as the influencer model, but we're translating, being able to be, the platforms don't have trust in and of themselves with storytelling to the consumers, but they have trust that they're going to get the right, consumers believe they're going to get the right content on those platforms. And so from that, it is really just a distribution vehicle. So I think that's a big differentiator for the publisher as well.
Yeah, I would also add, you know, TikTok is where every advertiser is trying to figure out, what do I do? TikTok, while they are hiring a lot, they do not have enough people to help every advertiser with this new platform, with Gen Z, with, you know, more, not sound off, but audio first. You saw it happen with Facebook, and you're going to see it happen with TikTok, that brands, publishers, and the creators themselves are going to be the ones who can teach and sort of guide brands through what good programs on a specific platform. Maybe it's TikTok, maybe it's Facebook. And ideally, I think you want to sit in a place where your idea can live across many platforms. For
sure. And so dovetailing with that that idea of like scale, but also quality content down in those different verticals. One of the biggest advantages that these platforms have is the PII, right? The registered user, and all the algorithms that they can, for better or worse, layer on top, right? And we also know that the cookie privacy reckoning is coming some point, right? Maybe tomorrow, maybe 2 years from now, who knows? But it is coming. So, sort of generally, what's your personal outlook on this? And I'll leave this open to anyone. To these data changes, do they create more walled gardens that create more opportunities, or is it a matter of just getting, becoming that first-party data outfit on your own side so that we can accurately or better compete with those bigger platforms? I'll leave it open to anybody. Jody.
I'll start. I think, look, I think, first of all, I think in a lot of ways, hopefully the changing in the cookies is really just the first of a lot of conversations around data and how we use it. Because I think, it's, yeah, sure, sharing it across the universe was maybe not what people wanted, but I'm not sure people want to be tracked that way anyway. And you're seeing that with the platforms. And so I think it's less about the sharing of the data as well, more about what anybody can use for data. So the first party does give them, I think, an advantage because they have so much of it. But again, that's where using the platforms, and so being able to go in and use the targeting they're available to us as a distribution vehicle for content we're creating kind of gives that tool back to publishers who may not be able to do it all on their own site. And yeah, we're all scrambling and have, we have a big robust first party data solution. Is it what the platforms have? Absolutely not. You just can't, people put their entire life on those platforms. So they have basically unlimited access to people's minds. But I think that's where the next step of privacy has to come from, which is if we're going to share all that information, it can't be open source, even for just the first party to utilize. So I think that'll be the second reckoning in the privacy space. Of course, we don't even know when the first reckoning will actually happen. But, I think, again, it's that same thing. They're going to have an advantage, but publishers who take advantage of that advantage will get it as well.
Yeah, I agree with Jody. I mean, I think as a publisher, if you're not doing something to ensure that you're collecting this type of data on your own by this point, you're definitely, you're behind, but also to Jody's point, there's no chance you're going to be able to collect as much of this first party as the large social platforms have, right? It's just a different distribution mechanism. It is a distribution mechanism. It's actually interesting, as you guys were talking before, having been in this industry for the better part of my career now, and working at, old school magazine companies, it's analogous to the newsstand, right? We're representing the content creators, we're representing brand. And these are just, right, Facebook and TikTok and Instagram, at the end of the day, even YouTube, like these are newsstands. It's more digitally savvy and certainly more complex and better targeted than the old school newsstand, but they're the newsstands of today. And it's on us to make sure that we're creating the right content, capturing the user data where and if we can in an authentic way. For us, we've got legacy subscriptions via a print vehicle like Sports Illustrated, which has multi-millions of subscription data that we house and use and leverage for advertising purposes. But then we also have, through online subscriptions across our properties, where that's become a robust business for us. I think to answer your initial question, Shaun, is like, what are we doing to ensure that we're ready for this? We are working behind the scenes to make sure that once the cookie is formally gone, whatever that's going to be, that we're as well prepared for that as possible. I think a big question that all of us have also is it really going to fall squarely on the shoulders of publishers to be prepared for this? I think maybe, but then, the other question is, are third parties going to be coming to market and the vendors of the world coming to market that work closely with Google and others and actually come with some kind of solution that, you can sign up for? I don't know the answer to that. I would probably, my hunch is that there will be third parties that bring something to market, but TBD.
Yeah, I would add, it's going to be building your own first party data as a publisher. It's going to be leaning into context in the short term, and well, I find that will be great, because is retargeting and cookie bombing only making us lazier, right? And I think the fact that there will be a dip in performance, we're all going to have to work together, all being publisher and advertiser. But at the same time, digital advertising is losing performance, or at least losing attribution. More people are buying things from seeing content on their phone and doing it directly. We're actually getting more attribution than we ever have. And so, I think as people are converting online, on mobile or through QR codes or however we're doing it, and with Web3 and things like that, there will be more attribution and more ways to collect data and more ways to do targeting.
Yeah, the IAB, what today said, digital advertising expected to grow by 8% in 2022, 12% in 2023, but they're suggesting the consumer migration go to ad light or ad free content, of course, right? So we want to hear that growth. So actually, just to dovetail off what you just said, Ken, go back to you on this one. So, and this is as much against the platforms as a general sales part, and we heard this from Rich at Complex and Nicole at Bleacher Report. But is there an expansion? Is there a greater pressure inside your walls to expand the different revenue streams that you do have, rather than that traditional advertising, licensing, e-commerce, all those different things? Is there a greater pressure to diversify your incoming revenue streams?
Yeah, diversification is really important. I think, Tasty, in that example, it moved eventually over to product licensing. And so I think, as you think about diversifying revenue streams, that should always be the goal in creating any IP or creating any content or just working with any sort of publishing group. Sales on the topic will sort of hear like, oh, product licensing, that's not good. Diversified revenue streams, I don't sell that. And we spend a lot of time thinking about, well, how could we bring that, publishing, media, content, and product licensing to a brand in one sort of sweep? That's a more difficult sell. It's a higher entry, but it's something that as you work with us, if it's maybe on media, then branded content, and then into other revenue streams, we'd happy to have clients sit in one box of just media or branded content. But if we can get them working across all of the boxes, then that's a really powerful story.
Yeah, I agree with Ken. The diversification, I don't know if there's greater pressure all of a sudden to have diversification of revenue streams. It feels like that's something that we as publishers, and again, I say we as publishers, and early on I said we're not squarely a publisher, so speaking out of both sides of my mouth, but you have to be diverse if you're going to be competitive today. Whether it's e-commerce, podcasts. Again, we're forming partnerships where the expertise lies. So we have a number of podcasts, but from a distribution standpoint, we've partnered with iHeartMedia, and they're doing a great job for us. We launched, when you talk about licensing, we just created a gaming or gambling site, partnering with 888. We created a ticketing hub called SITix. So there's a number of different things that we're doing in market to ensure that, beyond just advertising and subscriptions, we're as diverse as possible. And I think to be competitive today, you really have to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think diversification of revenue, like I said, I don't know that it's a new thing. I think, the thing is you have to be diversified across a lot of different things. And I think when you talk about the platforms, you be diversified in where you reach audiences. And so, a lot of times we talk about it as revenue streams, but it may also be brand building. If you're doing, a lot of these new revenue streams aren't profit streams, they're revenue streams, and they're not. So, but they may have other values. So is your brand cooler because is Tasty a bigger brand because it now has products in the store that people see? Is it, I don't know if it's revenue profit positive or not, but it's definitely can add cachet, because then you're going to an advertiser probably and saying, look how culturally relevant we are. And so you're building cultural relevance, you're building influence of your brand across as many places you can do. And the more you don't have to pay for that, the more it can be either, neutral or profitable, the better. And then also where you're reaching consumers, because that's where, and then unique ways to bring brands in, as Ken said, how do you, kind of bring these things along? Traffic is the big one. People just don't go to open up a browser and type a website in to the same degree they did anymore. And so that's where the platforms come in, because it's where people are consuming content. They don't see it any differently. I was in a meeting with a young agency person who said, we were talking about our Well and Good, and she's like, oh, you have a website too? and most people in our company would say it's only a website, right? So it's about being wherever consumers are and just making your brand stand out. And then that's a brand they want to partner with. And then from there, where do you bring that monetization opportunities to those third-party brands?
For sure. And, whether it was programmatic first or a pivot to video or putting things behind a subscription wall, are there any other, let's call them specific, either in your industries, I don't know, we have some broad scale piece here, specific industries or in the content silos that are sort of driving the decision making? I mean, I can obviously preface Avi there, given it's sports betting. We're both in the sports world. Betting, the opening up of betting in the U.S. is a big driver. But is there any other sort of general movement in the marketplace that is heavily influencing what you're doing from a content side that leads to some of the sales decisions that you're making?
I mean, if that's for us, I think that gaming and betting and fantasy, that's probably, the market, driving, at the same time, even internally, I'm sometimes the loud voice on saying that, not all content is created equal in terms of what people are going to pay for. So even if you have premium content in one vertical or category, and you're making money off of subscriptions, for example, you might have premium quality content in another category also, but it's not necessarily a category or audience segment where they're willing to pay a premium or even at all. And I think, as brand owners, as publishers that own brands or represent brands, you have to really understand that because when you move forward and start investing in what it costs, not just financially, but the resourcing needed to create a really good subscription product, you better know and understand the market and what actually is going to turn for you. So we do that ourselves. We're right now testing, for example, on sportsillustrated.com, si.com. I mentioned earlier the street.com. Street.com has a robust subscription service, and it really spiked, as it did for many financial service sites during the pandemic, right? People want to know what to do with their money. Sports, on the other hand, I think there's some examples out in market where, particularly some new players have done really well. But I don't know if that means all sports sites are going to actually all of a sudden be able to turn a subscription revenue. TBD, but you gotta evaluate and analyze it yourself.
I would say not a content trend, but just what we've seen in the pandemic, and I think everyone would agree, is the sales cycle has been disrupted. We are getting a lot more in quarter. Brands may not be sure what their message is, and we've had a lot of start and stops over the year around, what is the right tone or what is brand safe. And so I think, as we've been thinking a lot more about bringing something to brands that is, mostly fully baked or being able to be sort of having more quick turn options, because what we know is the 6-month planning cycle is just something that we can't count on anymore.
I think also, as you look at, at least, for our business, we're really focused on profitability. And I think I think it's a big change in the publishing space over, I know it sounds crazy that it wasn't maybe always the focus, but there was a lot of heavily funded VC brands that were looking to be anywhere. And so there were cool opportunities and they sounded amazing, but, the business models were either not there or were not clear what they were, and the hope was they would develop. And I think, in today's publishing world, being able to really feel like you're leaning into a place where you feel like there's a really strong business model to go along with it is important, because there's a ton of really cool opportunities that sound like will make your brand seem cool, but if they're not, is they worth the effort and the squeeze if there's not a huge business model behind it?
Who knew that brands were expected to make money? Amazing.
They get the fun out of publishing.
Hey, Ken, actually, you touched on this, and I wanted to, I know we talked about this one sort of offline. I know the last thing anybody wants to talk about is COVID, but, it's a sales group, right? I started by talking about this is built off of relationships. And while there is trust in brands, there's also the trust in relationships. And, the fact that people are going to do well with that money and that investment. Just given the nature of operating a sales teams, in-person meetings, again, trust building, how just has the last, 18 months just sort of changed the sales process and the sales cycle for you guys in how you go to market, speaking about technology, but just how and how you're dealing with the clients that generate the top end for your business.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to say it's harder to be top of mind with certain relationships, but also there's parts of it that have gotten easier to do with everyone at home. It's connecting the C level at the client side to the exec level at the publisher side is a lot easier to do because we can have more calls, right? But what's challenging is the ground level, how do you reach out to the agency teams? How do you reach out to sort of the front lines? Those are the groups that want that in-person connection a little bit more. So, I think that's the thing that will come back first. I don't think it's about ramping up travel and getting back to sort of what sales may used to have been. And the other thing I would think or just to say as a challenge is reading the peripherals. Being in the office or being in a client meeting and actually like walking the halls, that's the thing that has been the hardest thing to try to find a way to bring back. And I think we can manufacture it as restrictions are loosened, but trying to do it as safe as possible as well.
Yeah, we're in a situation. I mean, I agree with everything, that Ken was sharing. And for us, we're seeing that clients as a whole are, they were hesitant to meet. Now, if you can, get them out of their homes, many still have not returned to the office. I think some at the executive level are back in. They are willing to, do a meal, or we actually hosted an event ourselves down in Florida, and we flew a bunch of clients down, and they were all about it. They were like, let me get out of whatever town they were situated in. So that's been working pretty well. I think, as far as the workforce, and this is like obviously not just our industry, but we're all saying, holy cow, we're having twice as many meetings sitting from home now, because it's from one Zoom to the next to the next to the next. And it's not like the hours in the day are cutting down. It's just you can run to your kitchen and grab a sandwich and then get right back in front of your computer. Not sure if that's healthy or not. And I think we need to figure out what the long term on that looks like. For us specifically, we had right before the pandemic, our business over the last few years, we've acquired a number of different companies, and we had this aha moment where we just leased a really beautiful space downtown, had the entire floor, and we're bringing all these companies together on one floor. And we did that. And we were there. We took out a 15-year lease and brought, all 300 or so of the employees onto that one space. And then sure enough, 3.5 weeks into it, pandemic, office shut down, and we haven't been back since. And we actually just made the decision company-wide that we're becoming a fully remote organization, which was, we did internal surveys, external, you name it, but we are now formally a remote company. We did take out a space where, those who, want to come into an office, they have that opportunity. It's just not as large a space, but it's a lovely space. So I'm happy about that. But the large kind of footprint that we had in New York City is no longer. And I think as a company, we felt that wasn't needed in the short term being the next 2 or 3 years.
I think personally, it's interesting. It continues to evolve. I know we talk like we've been doing this for 18 months as if it's kind of been the same. And, it's one thing when everybody was virtual, everybody was in their homes, there was really nothing else to do to distract you. Well, we were all more productive because work was an outlet to some degree. We're all, most people are back doing a decent amount of things in their everyday life and being closer to those things that aren't work. I'm not convinced productivity is at the same level it was when there was nothing else to do, nor should it be, because it's really, we all for our own wellness need to do stuff. We're well and Good is our largest brand. We're a big focus on wellness in our company corporately, and that's, mental and physical. And so, I think about when I first started working remotely 1 day a week, it was a huge mental break for me to be able to not have to commute. I live outside the city for 5 days a week and actually was really extra productive at home. And starting 3-4 months ago, when I started going in 1 to 2 days a week, I felt the same mental refreshing from going in and changing it up. So I think, and geographically too, we have clients in certain parts of town that are like, you're not in the office, what are you talking about? And then in other places, it still feels like ground zero of the disease, yet, we're all going to 300-person weddings and stuff like that. So I think the story is still to be written as it continues to evolve. We all started opening up over the summer. then the Delta variant came, and now it's starting to maybe hopefully settle back into at least the next. I think of these all as next normals because there's no new, and they seem to constantly change. But we'll see. I think it still feels like a long time before clients are gonna be like, hey, come in and present in a big conference room to 10 of us. But we're out and about at dinners and lunches and conferences, and we just hosted our first event IRL this weekend in LA, a big kind of wellness outdoor workout for a partner. So I think there's a lot more to be said here on that, but I think it, to what Abby said, a mix is going to be the key. I don't think it's going to kind of be 0 of one or all of the other like it's been in the past. Those were kind of all in or all out in the last in the previous, and I think it's going to be somewhere in the middle moving forward.
Makes sense. So fighting on two fronts, fighting on the in-person and sales side of things, fighting our frenemies at the big platforms, always art and science. But thank you guys for coming together. And unless Steve has anything else.
Yeah, we do. We actually, let me squeeze in a question.
Yep, sure.
I'm reading it right off again from Sebastian. There was a point about scale and how it's imperative to have scale to compete in this day and age. There are clear advantages from the cost perspective, but could you provide examples or speak to synergies on the revenue side? For example, is it easier to win advertisers when you have a greater number of active users?
I would share one thing just in cookieless future, having scale and pivoting it to context or to pivoting against saying you have a specific audience. The brand will want to hear, love that you're male, female, 18 to 34, but what's my reach look like, right? And this depends on the type of advertiser you're talking to, but especially if you're talking to entertainment clients, you're gonna have to have a scale to come along with that story of great audience or great content-led ideas. So it's not imperative, sometimes smaller scale is better, but for specific clients or specific verticals, it's really important.
Yeah, I agree wholly with that. I do same. There are certain niche areas or verticals where having that small, tight, dedicated audience is certainly valuable to brands, and they're willing to actually pay a premium for that. At the same time, I will tell you, it's a case study that we've seen. We acquired Sports Illustrated about 2 years ago, and it was doing about 11.5 million uniques, ComScore uniques. And our kind of mission and what we do was to really grow that audience in an organic way. We were, I think, the number 12th ranked sporting entity on ComScore. Did not have a lot of inbounds coming in at that level. And Sports Illustrated was this declining beast. Unfortunately, that was this, household name brand that everyone used to love. And we've been trying to really resurrect that. And I'm happy to say we're now in a number 6 position on ComScore. Our uniques are up at nearly 45 million. I think the report comes out this week. We'll be at 45 million uniques. And I will tell you, there's a different mix and consideration set that you're put into, when you reach that level of scale. Where I know we try not to be in the business of just taking in RFPs and responding to RFPs, and you can't do that, as we were talking about earlier. But those RFPs that do come in, those budget amounts are a lot different at 45 million uniques than what you would get traditionally at 11 or 12 million uniques. So I think there's a different consideration. And then the flip side of that is then when you're looking at scale, not necessarily from a vertical or brand standpoint, but more as a platform or a network, that obviously plays in. And you want to have, when you get into the world of audience segmenting and targeting, the more you have, right, as you narrow down the targeting that brands desire, you need to have a bigger pool, because as you keep narrowing and slicing down, there's only so many of any one particular vertical or demographic that you're able to target against. So you want to have a big pool to actually choose from. Hopefully that answers the question a little bit, but happy to elaborate, time permitting.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just add in a little bit, but I think everyone has an audience they want to reach, and they want to reach as many of that audience as possible. Some of those audiences are super narrow, and so there isn't a huge pool, but they still want to reach as many of that people as possible. So again, if you have mass scale across the board, you can essentially find more of those individual audiences. But tying it back to the platforms a little bit, I also think that is the one place where they can be super helpful. Where if you don't have as much of that audience, or you don't have that scale, you can often scale your brand with a partner on those platforms. And so that they probably are the biggest lifeblood to some of those small brands that might not have individual scale, but they can kind of rent the scale from the platforms. But yeah, I think advertisers want to reach as many of their audience as they possibly can and in as easy a place as they can. So every audience is different size pool, but they want to reach as many of them as possible.
Well, that was great. I love that Sports Illustrated example. That really speaks to it exactly. Thanks, guys. Shaun, Ken, Jody, Avi, thank you so much. This is great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right.